What's going on, Bucks fans? It's Creamsicle Week. Great week for the Bucks. They brought the uniforms back last year. A lot of the players have been talking that they want them back even more. Something about that orange just brightens your day, right? I mean, the new fresh style from the Duvin Designs collection, repping that. You guys got to check that out. It launched yesterday at 10 a.m. Check that stuff out. I'll show you a little bit more of the gear if you missed it on the other day. But so much to talk about on this show. We've got Daniel Flick from SI Now covering the Falcons. He's going to be on. We're going to break down behind enemy lines. We'll get into what's changed the last 2 weeks with this Falcons team. Obviously, get into some of the injury report. What do the Bucks need to do to win? All that stuff and more. We'll get into that. We'll be giving away a pair of tickets to the Creamsicle game here coming up this Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons. So a lot of stuff tuned for this episode. Then we'll get into all of it right now, right after the break.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Pirate Parlay.
Battle intercepted, picked off in the end zone. Bucks are going to beat the Chiefs. We're the champions of the world.
The sickest Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. It's going to be sick.
As you guys can see, we are back here. Creamsicle week. We're all done up. Everything's creamsicle. We got the banner creamsicle. I'm dressed in creamsicle. We got the lights creamsicle. We are all creamsicled out for this game this week against the Atlanta Falcons. Again, I want to thank you guys for tuning into another edition of the Pirate Parlay podcast here on the Sick Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, JC Allen. We'll get into all the injury news and stuff like that. Bucky Irving, I know. We'll get into him playing this week and so much more, some of the injuries to the Atlanta Falcons as well. And to do that, we'll bring in a special guest. We have Daniel Flick. He's a writer, reporter, boots in the ground for SI Now, going behind enemy lines. Daniel, how we doing, my man?
I'm doing well, man. Thrilled to join you here. Was not expecting this, but I'm glad I can help you out, man. Glad to be here.
I appreciate it so much. So I guess let's start with the injury report, right? Came out for the Bucks. As expected, Mike Evans is out for a while. Tyke Smith, back cushion, not going to play on the Bucs side. Limited, though, in participation. Surprising to see Bucky Irving. I had reported previously. I was told that he was not expected to play. Again, these NFL teams, they have amazing doctors and rehabilitation. Looks like he's going to give it a go. Definitely not 100%. A lot of people, some people think, again, we just kind of rushed a guy like Mike Evans back. Maybe we should pump the brakes on Irving with Tucker and White, but he's going to give it a go. Looks like they'll also be with Payne Durham, who's questionable. In addition to that, they've got a few other guys who are going to be out, and Greg Gaines is not going to be playing this game. And the other questionable on the injury report is Raheem Jarrett, who, of course, is still on IR. He'll need to be activated before they make that choice. But on the Falcons, it looks like they're going to be again without Troy Anderson, who missed that first matchup between the Bucs. They're one of their best linebackers there. But the biggest thing is Justin Simmons popping up on the injury report this week and now doubtful. Get into that. What's going on the Atlanta side of the ball?
Yeah, it's interesting with Simmons, right? Because he hurt his hamstring late in the fourth quarter against Carolina in a blowout win for Atlanta in Week 6. Asked him after the game. He said everything was all good, all solid, and then he pops up on, I think it was a Wednesday report last week, and he was out and was, I want to say it was questionable entering Sunday against Seattle. Played the whole game, was all fine, and then throughout the week he was limited Wednesday, Thursday, and was out today. So his situation's kind of tricky, because it was one where they initially thought he was fine. They actually removed him in Carolina for a precaution, is what Raheem said after it. And so it was not supposed to be anything, too heavy. And it's kind of become a lot worse than what it is. So if Simmons can't play, which is what the expectation is, it'll be Richie Grant extensively playing, that's how Atlanta was expected to enter the season, right? From about mid-March onward, he was the guy, and then Atlanta signed Simmons in mid-August. And it completely flipped everything. But so he has been largely a number 3 safety this year, was a starter heavily in 22, and played a fair amount last year before he got benched towards the end of the year, and has largely had more success as more of a, we'll have you play lower, have you play largely, playing the run, and he's kind of had some coverage struggles. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, losing a high level player in Simmons is not ideal for Atlanta, especially again the way that the whole pretty much all of last week went. It was all right, he'll play, and then all of this week it was kind of the he was thought to play, and so it's kind of a last minute thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But he's an important loss.
Another big one questionable is Ryan Newsel as well, starting center for Atlanta right now. As you guys continue to work back from injury, what I'm blanking on your starting center, the normal starting center name right now, but what's going on with that?
Yeah, so you got Newsel, who, as you mentioned, is Atlanta's number 2 center. Atlanta's still waiting on Drew Dolman to return. Yeah, he's still on IR. They're still waiting him out a little bit. I think he's close, but he's not back yet, and has not had his window open yet either. So we'll see how it goes. But if Newsel can't play, you'll see Matt Hennessy play for Atlanta on Sunday. Hennessy was Atlanta's center in 21, and then was in contention for the job in 22. Lost it. Him and Drew Dolman had a competition actually throughout the summer of 22 that Hennessy lost, and then he got hurt last year's training camp, got cut in the spring actually. He spent all of last year on IR. So he was re-signed to Atlanta's practice squad about a month ago. Was recalled each week he was on there, and then when his 3 elevations exhausted, he got signed. So he's been he played 5 snaps last week when Ryan Newsel left, and then when Newsel came back after the one drive that he missed, he came right back in and played the whole second half. So he was out Wednesday. He's been involved a little bit more throughout the last few days. So he is firmly questionable, I think, but Atlanta is very comfortable with Hennessy if he has to play.
So, I mean, it's only been 2 weeks since these two teams have played each other.
Right.
You see they got a win over the Carolina Panthers. It looked like it was a little tougher than they wanted it to be at times, but they ended up finishing that game 30-20. But then they dropped last week to the Seahawks. They allowed them to score 34 points, only score 14 themselves. So what's kind of been the story the last 2 weeks since these two teams have played? Obviously 1-1 in those games, much like the Buccaneers, 1-1 since those matchups. We know that they're playing for first place in the NFC South with a huge tiebreaker at stake. What's been the difference between these two last weeks coming into this week?
Yeah, I think, JC, the one thing about Atlanta, the thing that was problematic when you were in Atlanta is still problematic now when I'll be heading into Raymond James on Sunday. Atlanta's pass rush is still not good. Atlanta had 1 sack on Mayfield. It had 1 sack on Geno Smith on Sunday. I want to say had 3 hits on Andy Dalton without a sack. This is still a league worst pass rush that has not gotten much better. So that part's the same. As far as what's new, there's not really changing a whole lot as far as a personnel perspective. A lot of the guys who were out then are still out now. They haven't really added anybody new into that fold. It's really the same unit. I think, I felt like Carolina, the 18-point win was about what it was. It felt a little closer early on, and then Atlanta really pulled away later on in that game. But it was it felt out of reach before maybe the scoreboard officially showed it. And then Seattle showed up and made the however many mile flight, and just kicked Atlanta's butt last week. So I mean, that was what it was, right? I mean, that was a 60-minute beatdown. Atlanta's run defense, which has not been very good throughout the year, had a rough go. Atlanta's lack of pass rush really showed up. And then Atlanta's offense, I mean, I believe Kirk Cousins threw 2 picks and had a scoop and score. I think Seattle had a scoop and score, if my memory serves. He had 3 turnovers, all on 3 consecutive drives. So it was one of those, you kind of just flush it type of weeks for Atlanta. But from a personnel perspective, a health perspective, everything's the same as it was. I think confidence is important for this week, as Atlanta was riding high, and then Seattle came in and that was probably Atlanta's worst all-around showing of the entire year. So it's been it was a reality check, I think. And so I think you're seeing a team this week that's kind of tried to, not sure I'd say hit the reset button, but it kind of has been, because I think what happened last week was very, very surprising. So it's pretty much the same team now.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Kirk Cousins, 7 interceptions over the first 7 weeks of the season, 10 touchdowns. He's been relatively clean in the pocket, only 13 sacks, but he destroyed the Bucs over the middle of the field. You look at the numbers that were put up, it was like 262 yards and 2 touchdowns and the 1 interception, of course, but still. Where has the Falcons kind of offense trajectory gone? Are they targeting the middle of the field more still? Are they trying to get Drake London on the outside a little bit more? What's been the offensive scheme the last couple of weeks? Is it about featuring Bijan Robinson finally this season and getting him more involved? What has been the kind of difference from week 5 to week 7 with the way the offense has been operating?
Yeah, I think you've seen Kyle Pitts have a lot heavier impact. I think when he went into that Tampa game, he had about 8 catches all season. I think he had 7 alone. And that really jump-started his season. He's got, I think, 17 catches for 223 yards the last 3 weeks. So he's been playing at the level that a lot of people thought he would. He only had, I think, 5 targets the week after, but he had about 8 last week, and he had 3 on the opening drive alone. So that is one thing that there has been a real emphasis after a very slow month of September. Atlanta has tried to involve Kyle Pitts a lot more. I thought Bijan Robinson played maybe his most impressive game of the season, if not career, last week. He was about as agile as I've seen him, heavily involved as a runner in that game. I think the Falcons are still trying to find the balance between him and Algier. It's a work in progress each week, and you'll see weeks where Algier ends up with 18 carries or 12 carries, and he'll come back a week after and have 5. And so they're trying to ride the hot hand. Algier, if you look at it, highly efficient runner who has not really been utilized in the way that a lot of people feel like he probably should be. It's been a lot of identity searching still. It was funny because, Atlanta went out and it beat Tampa with 509 yards from Cousins, and then came back the week after in Carolina and won with 198 yards on the ground. Heavy run game, and then what happened against Seattle was a little bit of neither really working the way that it had hoped to. And so the running game is still getting better. It's not what it used to be. And again, when Atlanta had Smith as head coach and play caller, it was just run heavy scheme, right? And it's not that way. They're trying to be more pass oriented. It's worked at times, but I think they're still trying to figure out who they are. And so they have used them middle of the field, maybe not as much as what it was early in the year, actually. I think Drake London's role has become more consistent this year from what it was a few years ago. And last year there were times where obviously he's killed Tampa for a while. It's like he's got, I think, 4 games of 120 yards or more in all, and I think 3 of them are against Tampa, which is, I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure if anybody knows why that is, but it works for him. But he's been more consistently involved. He's been their main middle of the field guy. They've tried to use Mooney more as a will kind of stretch you vertically type of guy, but he's a guy who can do more, and they're not really using him in that way, I feel like, as much as what they should be. But it's been a lot of what it was, I'd say, in week 5.
Yeah, you look at the passing game and the weapons that they have. Obviously, Drake London. He's one of those games where he has an outstanding game against the Bucs, and then he has usually like a clunker against the Bucs. So out there putting up the numbers he did in week 5 with 12 receptions, 154, 1 touchdown. I'm sure the Bucs are hoping that this is going to be the clunker that he usually puts up. Same thing with Mike Evans. Seems like they trade off games where one of them is explosive, the other one's really not. And of course, Mike Evans isn't in this game. The question I have for you, Kirk Cousins, we talked about on the last time before these two, there's questions about his mobility drop back, question about him, kind of taking a lot of snaps in shotgun rather than under center. What does he kind of look like? Obviously, he went to work on the Bucs and threw, 509 passes, so it seemed to look all right. But is there still questions about Kirk Cousins being all the way back and his mobility? And he's never been a mobile guy, but his mobility to kind of evade in the pocket. And what has his kind of what are Falcons fans and what are you seeing on a week in and week out basis from Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I think his season almost climaxed against Tampa in week 5, and it felt like it was a slow build up to that point, and it was so good. And it feels like the last couple of weeks it's been about a half second late. I think from a health perspective, he's fine. He's all good. I mean, I think it might be close to a Kyle Pitts situation from last year where he had the surgery and he came back and he was about 85 to 90% week 1. But then by the time that you would be back to 100%, you've got other nicks and bruises that happened, and it's just part of what happens. And so I think he was about 100%, if not very close to it in week 1. But the part of it then is that he's still trying to learn a whole new offense, and they were very adamant about not playing him throughout the entire preseason slate, which created a very fun Twitter mention for me in week 1. There was a lot of people who were not very happy about that in our comment section. So, but yeah, no. So that it felt like by the time they found their chemistry around week 3, week 4, into week 5, they were at a high level, and then it kind of got nicked up a little bit, and it's it seems like he's in Carolina, especially. He almost threw about 3 or 4 picks, and then he came back in Seattle and threw 2 of them. They were later, and they were when I think Atlanta was down 17 on at least 1, if not 2, of his interceptions. So that's part of it, and it's just kind of what happens. But I do think there's been times lately where the timing and the rhythm maybe hasn't been what he's wanted, what Atlanta's wanted. I think what they found in week 5 was about as much trust. I think Kirk after it even said that, like, hey, this week I went into it saying I want to trust these guys. I'm trying to throw to a spot now, and I finally have that trust that they'll be where I think they'll be. And it felt like the last few weeks he had it, but he was still a bit late throwing the ball, and it led to some not so great, very, very risk-heavy throws. So he's had ups and downs, probably more than what the Falcons thought when they signed a 36-year-old who's made 4 Pro Bowls, if I'm not mistaken. But I think ultimately, obviously still highly respected. And he's been a very welcome presence, not only on the field, but off the field as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And, that's something that, you kind of look at and you can, people thought about, right? Kirk Cousins coming in, Achilles, 36 years old, new offense, new scheme, new system, new everything. Getting to use it can take some time. And of course, looks like that Bucs game, as you said, was the pinnacle so far, and everything else has been kind of underwhelming since then. They've still been able to manage to get some wins, but it hasn't been Kirk Cousins driven wins. I think it's been a little bit of everything, a kind of perfect storm happening to get those wins, and not necessarily Kirk Cousins willing them to win. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. We're here at Parlay Podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. We're joined with Daniel Flick from SI Now, covering the Bucs, the Falcons up in Atlanta. Gonna jump in before we jump into the defense. Do want to shout out one of my sponsors here, Tampa Bay Buccaneers Cruise, guys. We've talked about it. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet, I don't know what you're doing. Again, Christmas right around the corner. Be a perfect Christmas gift for the favorite Bucs fan in your life. Tampa Bay Buccaneers Cruise, March 7th to 10th. Setting sail from Fort Lauderdale down to Key West and Bimini, Bahamas. Tons of players on this cruise, alumni, current players, Jordan Whitehead, Brad Johnson, Trey Palmer, Kalijah Cansey, Yaya Diaby, Luke Gedeke, Graham Barton, Dexter Jackson, Mike Allstott, Derek Brooks, so many more, and some surprises to be announced as well. Last year, the big surprise was Warren Sapp. So there's so many more that are going to be on this cruise. So much fun, unforgettable. It's an unforgettable vacation that features so many different events such as sail away parties, trivia contests, bingo, cocktail parties, player panels, water volleyball competition, theme parties, and so much more. You guys definitely don't want to miss out on this awesome opportunity to celebrate your team and create lasting memories with fans from all across the country and your favorite Bucs players. Definitely check out Tampa Bay Bucs Cruise. Last day to purchase your tickets, December 11th. So check that out. Link is in the bio down below. You guys aren't going to want to miss this at all. So shout out to our partners, Tampa Bay Cruise. Fango tickets, we'll get to them. We are still giving away 2 tickets to this week's Atlanta Falcons Bucs creamsicle game. We'll get into that a little bit later. Stay tuned. If you guys are here, make sure you guys are liking, subscribing, turning on notifications. Appreciate everybody in there. We'll get to some of the comments after we wrap up here, but I do want to talk about the defense because you mentioned it. The pass rush sucks. And
Yeah.
I try to think of a way to say it politely, but there's just no way to put it politely. They are not getting to the quarterback under any circumstances. Grady Jarrett has 1.5 sacks. Matt Judon, 1.5 sacks. They are just not really, and it's not just the sacks either. It's the pressure, right? D. Alford has one. David Onyemata has one. James Smith-Williams has one. And that's it. That's it. 6 total sacks on the season for the Atlanta Falcons after giving them a 3rd-round pick for Matt Judon, who they thought that would be the guy to kind of turn that around. Of course, they lost some guys in free agency, and then they also lost Braylon Trice, their 3rd-round pick in training camp. But it hasn't just been the sacks, it's been the pressure as well. What is going on with the pressure situation, sack situation in Atlanta?
Yeah, you mentioned Judon, JC. I mean, he said he was asked, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, how he would rate his season. He gave it a D-. I mean, he is completely cognizant of the fact that he was cognizant of the fact that he was supposed to be that guy and just hasn't been so far. I think the best way to summarize Atlanta's pass rush, I would go back to Sunday against Seattle. You look at, you mentioned James Smith-Williams. He got a sack that put him into a tie for 2nd. Well, I guess a tie for 3rd, and team leader in sacks with 1. And then he got hurt later on and had a hamstring. So that kind of is a very fitting summarization. It's just there's not been much that has gone right for Atlanta. There's also just the pieces that they have. The Falcons kind of thought, I think, that Judon would be the guy, and they thought that the interior of Jarrett and Onyemata would be a little bit more productive than it's shown so far. I think Jarrett had a really good week 1, he had a really good week 6, and a really good week 7. So he's been a little up and down in between. He's always been who he's been. It's just a factor of how many guys are blocking him, and the Falcons thought they'd have more around him to where even if he's got 2 or 3 guys, that there'd be other one-on-ones that other players could win. It just hasn't happened. The Falcons thought Arnold Ebiketie would take a step forward, and for the first 5 weeks, he had a very minimal role. The idea was to have him rush, primarily in obvious passing downs, and then guy just wasn't really on the field much. He had a career low pressure rate. His pressure rate's still at a career low, but he's played more the last few weeks. Week 6, Atlanta chose not to start Lorenzo Carter, who's now on IR with a pretty nasty concussion. So Ebiketie had a larger role against Seattle. He had a larger role in Carolina. He's had three hits, I want to say, the last 2 games apiece. So the pressure from him has picked up, but it's just, throughout the summer, they had a lot more exotic blitz packages than what's been shown so far. There was a lot more blending as far as they had some unique sim pressures that I don't think they've shown so far, and they don't really have the pieces. So I think it's a lot of factors, all of that to say that they have a league low 6 sacks and are averaging less than a sack a game. And that's after having, I believe, 1 or 2, and I think 2 or 3 in week 1, to where it was actually a reasonably encouraging start. So, I mean, the last month and a half has just been brutal. They feel like they're trending, up, but they felt they were trending up last week too, and still only had the 1 sack. And it's not a situation that I think can be fixed, on a week-to-week ordeal. So,
do you think this is more of players just kind of not grasping fully Raheem Morris's defense, or is it just not having the talent?
I think it's tricky. I think it's more of a talent thing than anything. I think it's the pieces that they have, because again, they were a 4-3 last year. They've run more of a 3-4 this year, and so there's guys who are Atlanta's pass rush was obviously abysmal in 21 and 22. Had, I want to say, 39.5 combined sacks total over 2 years, which would have been like middle of the pack in like 1 year alone, So they beat that number last year running in Ryan Nielsen's scheme, and it was a really effective scheme. And, I don't think it's as much the personnel piece. I think last year's group, they had so much more of a blended presence up front. They'd rush linebackers more. They just had a lot more creativity to it. And so even though the talent wasn't necessarily there, they still had a couple of guys, and you lose Campbell and just they've lost some real pieces there from last year who are important. But I think it's a bit of a mixture of both, to the point to where the talent isn't where it needs to be, the scheme isn't where it needs to be, and when you combine it together, it's just you end up having the result you have now, which has not been pretty.
Yeah, it's tough. And you look at that front seven as a whole, it hasn't just been the pressures, right? I mean, it hasn't just been the lack of sacks. It's been their defense in the run game too. They're ranked 24th in the league, allowing 137 yards. If you look back at that game against the Bucs ran the ball for 160 yards on the ground, and didn't get in the end zone, but they were still able to kind of run the ball at will. What has been going on with that front seven, not just at pressure wise, but their lack of ability to stop the run?
Yeah, that's kind of another area that Raheem Morris thought Atlanta had made progress in, and then still had. And I think Seattle had a really, really strong ground game last week. It's tricky, right? There's a combination of things, and you're trying to add more of a pass rush presence to it, and when you're in some of those looks that might be more helpful in that realm, you're hurting the run stuff. But it's funny, the Falcons defensive front, they're not really playing the two rookies that they drafted very much at all. I mean, it's Raheem Morris has mentioned they're trying to slow play, and they trust the older, experienced players they have up front. Then you look at the bodies and the production, it just really hasn't been what they've wanted. And so I think it all kind of comes back to the guys that they have. I think when you look at a Jarrett or an Onyemata, it's a couple of guys who are known more for their pass rush stuff,
Right.
high penetrators, quicker, not exactly conducive to run game success. And I think the linebackers as well. There was a couple of runs that happened last week. The linebacker situation is a bit rough, right? I think Caden Ellis has been solid. They are very, very fond of him. He's not been as good as what he was last year, but he's been fine. The spot next to him, you get Landman, who's been hurt, who missed a month. He came back. He's looked a little bit slower at times. I thought week 6 against Carolina, especially last week, he's not as twitchy as what he is. He's already not an overly athletic player. He's much more known for just his on-field vision, his instincts, his feel, than he is any athletic trait. And so he's already been a little bit slower. Does not look explosive. They're without Anderson. And then the only other, linebacker on the roster, J.D. Bertrand, round 5 rookie, who played one game extensively against, I think it was actually against Tampa Bay, which was fine,
Yeah.
but you saw the end result of, I think you mentioned they ran for 160 yards, right? So the linebacker play hasn't been great. The play up front hasn't been great, and it's just a combination of what they're trying to run maybe hasn't been as great either. It's kind of the same thing as what they have with the pass rush. It's the pieces aren't there, and schematically there's things from, I don't know if necessarily they're playing the gaps the way that they probably should be playing the gaps. That's also probably not my thing to say, because who knows how they're coaching it and all that, but there's a lot of factors at play.
So it's not all bad on the defense. So you look at their red zone rate. They are 12th in the league, 52.2% in defense in the red zone, and also their passing defense is actually one of the better in the league. They're ranked 12th, 13th in pass defense, only allowing 199 yards. We know the names: AJ Terrell, obviously. Jesse Bates back there as well, and they got Mike Hughes. Alford. Justin Simmons is a big part of that pass defense too. All pro free at free safety. They're having him play a little bit strong, and him and Jesse are playing a little bit kind of interchangeable right there. But how big of a loss is it for this pass defense if Simmons can't play? And what do you expect them to try to do to kind of course, Mike and Chris aren't there, but try to limit the Bucs this weekend?
Right. It'd be a huge loss, because the important thing to realize with this is that Atlanta's secondary is actually, at least entering last week, had allowed the highest completion rate in the NFL, about 73%, I want to say. So what that tells, but also on that same note, I believe opponents were averaging about 6.5 yards per attempt. So it was like, yes, they're allowing a lot, but they're keeping a lot of it short. Why? Because you have 2 all-pro safeties, right? And so they're not trying to challenge them, because you look at Simmons, you look at what, frankly, with Bates, since he arrived, he's been great. But even before that, his 5 years in Cincy were phenomenal as well. And so you're not trying to throw at them, right? And Atlanta's corners have tackled at a very high level all year. I think the job that Mike Hughes, throughout the whole summer, a lot of people thought he was not an ideal, he is their CB2, and that was a situation a lot of people were not fond of, and he's handled it extremely well. They put Clark Phillips out there as well, and he's handled it pretty well. They have guys who are very, very strong tacklers, very physical, and whatever is thrown is usually shorter because, as I mentioned, you're not trying to challenge a Simmons, challenge a Bates. And when it's thrown shorter, you're able to really, it's all contained base. It's a bend but not break type of scheme. And it's one that's worked to an extent. But then you have games like last week in Seattle or in Atlanta against Seattle where it's not great, right? And it only works if your offense is scoring at a higher level. And if you can score, high 20s, low 30s, if you're allowing 24, 25 a game, that's fine, right? And so for a while, they kind of just survived it. Now you're getting to that point where it puts so much pressure on Cousins and Zach Robinson and the whole offense because what you have right now, we're trying to keep it short. We can't stop the run. So now we have to try to, if you're in the red zone, have to prevent it. It's a whole situation where they are what they are defensively, and what they are is not great. And so it's just trying to contain at whatever level that they can. And so if you lose Simmons, it's just a complete killer to all that. Because as I mentioned earlier, with Grant, high-level run defender, not great in coverage. So it does put a lot of strain. Terrell, Bates, Hughes. Atlanta's very zone-heavy. I'll be curious to see if they try a little bit more man.
Right.
But yeah, it'd be a big loss.
And then another thing, they also struggle in third down defense. They are one of the worst teams in the league on third down defense, ranked 30th, allowing 46.7% conversion rate. Nearly 50 half the time they're allowing a conversion. Their scoring defense is down as well. They're in the 20s, allowing 24 points a game. How does the loss of Troy Anderson, who missed the first game, how does the loss of Justin Simmons affect their third down defense? Has already been struggling as well.
Right. It all kind of plays hand in hand, right? And the one thing, because, Raheem and Lake and everyone's been asked about this all year, right? And the common answer is it starts earlier than that, right? And if you're giving up 3 to 4 yards a run, you're going to find yourself with offenses having a lot more 3rd and 2 or 3, short, regardless. Right. And that in turn hurts pass rush too, because then you're not in those spots to where you can just rush, right? Because if it's 3rd and 3, you kind of have to prepare yourself for whatever. So you can't just pin your ears back and go. So that's a very important part of it. I think with Anderson, Raheem called him a Ferrari on Monday. The guy, a high-level athlete, can just flat out fly. If he's out there, I think he's a high-level blitzer when put in the position. When put in an advantageous spot for it. He's still not exactly the most nuanced with his hands and whatnot, but he's still a high-level athlete to where if you let him have an alley, it can be really scary for opposing offenses. So when you lose him and you lose someone like Simmons, who's so smart and just really sees the field so well, you do have to kind of adjust the way that you play it. But it all comes back to if Atlanta can stop the run and put Tampa in more 3rd and 8 or longer, it changes everything. But it's finding yourself in those spots where you're not in a 3rd and 2 or whatever, because that's been the whole problem all year. Because then the pass, rush isn't great. The run stop isn't great. And now you're in 3rd and 2. Really, whatever you want to do, you can probably get. So that's how you end up with I think you said they're number 30 league wide in it, right?
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how it all happens. So it starts even earlier than that. It starts on 1st. It starts on 2nd with a lot of the same problems that you and I have kind of rehashed the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's great. It's somewhere where I think the Bucs can take advantage of because they are so good at getting those yardage on 1st down and setting themselves up in 3rd and short. You got a couple seconds left before we get out of here?
Absolutely.
Let's give away some tickets. What do you think?
I like it. Let's go for it.
Let's go. All right. So, guys, it's time. We're going to give away 2 free tickets to this weekend's Bucs Creamsicle game on Sunday at 1 o'clock. Thanks to our new sponsor. Super excited to have them. FanGo Tickets. FanGo Tickets, your number one source for live events in Tampa Bay. Tired of getting blitzed by ticketing companies? Turn to FanGo, your exclusive, locally owned and operated Tampa Bay ticketing partner that offers fans like you full transparency. They prioritize fair pricing and no hidden fees so Tampa fans can enjoy events without unexpected costs. Visit fangotickets.com for unbeatable prices, personalized seat selection, and local partnerships that will take your game day to the next level. These guys, FanGo is awesome. I've been talking to them and flirting with them for a little bit. They literally show you what they're making, not like some of these other ticket companies that advertise no hidden fees. They literally give you exactly what you're paying for your ticket, what the taxes are, what they're taking from it, and it's usually not much. They also have some awesome partnerships in the works where you'll be able to buy your ticket, you'll be able to buy your parking, you'll also be able to get reservations at a local restaurant in the Tampa Bay area, whether it's the Lightning, whether it's the Bucks, whether it's the Rays when they come back, whatever, where you can have a reserved table. We all know how before you go to a game, if you're going to go early and pregame a little bit, it's hard. It's so difficult to get a table anywhere. They're going to take that out. They're going to give you a great deal, burger, beer, cheap price, reserved table. You just go there. Say the game's at 7, you get there at 5:30. That's your reservation. You're already set. You don't need to fight other people for a table. It's already set there. So much good stuff coming with FanGo and so much cool stuff coming down the line with what they're trying to build. And again, they're locally owned and operated. Again, especially after the hurricane, it's so important to support local businesses. Check out FanGo. Time we've been waiting for. Drum roll. The winner of our first giveaway, there will be more. The winner of our first giveaway, receiving 2 tickets to this week's Buccaneers Falcons throwback creamsicle matchup, is Jared Britton. Jared Britton, you have won the tickets. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for entering the raffle. Everyone else, again, there will be other opportunities to win. Jared, get at me, DM me on Twitter, and we'll get you all hooked up with these tickets, man. Congratulations. I appreciate everyone who entered. We will be doing this more often, so stay tuned. I'll be announcing it live here on the podcast, on our post-game podcast, so you'll get first crack at it. And we'll be rotating different games and such throughout the season. So appreciate everyone who entered. Appreciate Jared. Again, get after me, shoot me a DM, and we'll get you all hooked up with the tickets. So again, everyone, we're here at Pirate Parlay Podcast with Daniel Flick, writer for SI Now, covering the Atlanta Falcons boots on the ground here on the Pirate Parlay Podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. If you guys are on YouTube, make sure you guys are liking, subscribing, turning on reminders. That way, every time we go live. We'll get into the key matchups here of the game, and then we'll get our score predictions, and we'll get the heck out of here. Daniel, I want to ask you, if the Falcons are going to win this game, what do they do? What do they have to do on offense?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to see balance is very, very important for what Atlanta wants to do. So it's, very obvious answer, I feel like. But when the Falcons offense is at its best, I don't think the 509-yard game that what Atlanta had on that TNF game is what Atlanta wants to do. What the Falcons said for that week is that we're going to call the game that we think is, what's probably best for how Tampa will play. I'm sure Tampa will probably approach it in a little bit newer light after what happened, last time. But I think it'll be interesting to watch it because the Falcons can run it at a higher level. This is a team that had not ran it very well through the first 5 or so weeks of the year and has kind of run it better the last few. When you run it well, it can take a little bit less stress off the offensive line. Really helps. In my personal opinion, with Cousins and his age, the way they're trying to run the offense, it opens up some of that across the middle stuff as well. Running the ball, very important. If Atlanta can find a balance to where it can run for about 150, I think that's probably highly helpful.
And then if the Bucs are going to succeed on offense, what do they need to take advantage of with that defense?
I think hitting explosive plays will be very important. Without Simmons, again, highly unlikely that he ends up playing on Sunday. If Tampa can just find, a lapse here or there, hit a big play, not having Evans, not having Chris Godwin, obviously huge losses. But if you can still find a way to hit a few of those shot plays, I think that's highly, highly helpful. It's possible. I mean, if what happened with Richie Grant throughout the stretch of last year is he would allow some, explosive plays playing against the pass. And I think that's ultimately kind of lost him a spot last year. Kind of when Atlanta was in that stretch run late. And so if Tampa can exploit that a little bit, I think that ends up kind of changing the entire week.
And then if the Falcons need to do what on defense to get after the Bucs and win this game?
defend the run, because I think what we've seen so far is that pass rushing probably not going to be much better, right? So if you're the Falcons and you can limit Tampa to about 100 yards on the ground to where it's not 140, 150, changes the whole picture, right? But I'm sure Raheem Morris would love 2 or 3 sacks. From what we've seen, it's just super hard to predict that or to say, it's how it'll play out. I think defending the run to where you can maybe put yourself in a little bit more advantageous spots rushing the passer would help a lot. But if they can make Tampa Bay have to throw the football with the receivers that, are on the roster and those who aren't, and the ones who are hurt, and if you can make Tampa have to throw it to win, I think that's where it becomes a little bit more advantageous for Atlanta.
And then the Buccaneers, what do they need to do to rattle Kirk Cousins and kind of limit that passing offense and rushing offense in order to have success to win the game?
It's interesting. After week 1, Pittsburgh's side mentioned that Kirk Cousins is really good if you blitz him. If for Tampa to win, I think you're going to have to get pressure on Kirk with 4. I think that's ultimately what it comes. It's an important part every week, right? But especially against Cousins, a guy who, if you run a man blitz, Atlanta's receivers are separating at a very good level right now. Even Kyle Pitts is actually, I think, separating at the highest rate of his entire career right now. So they have guys who are finding ways and they're in advantageous throwing windows to where if Kirk has time, it'll be tough. So it's, the edge rushers, it's making him uncomfortable. You mentioned earlier he's not athletic. He never has been. He does not exactly look comfortable when you force him to scramble. He is much more scrambling, just trying to buy an extra half second, throw it away, than he is trying to find an extra half second to extend a play and have some Mahomes-esque magic, right? That's not who he is. So if you can make him uncomfortable, it completely changes everything.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think when you look at this offensive situation for the Bucs, down Mike and Chris, they're gonna have to find creative ways to move the ball. I think running the ball is going to be a very big key for them. They've had success over the last 4 games of the season. They've gone over 125 yards on the ground, including 160 at Atlanta. I think that needs to be the continued case with that 3-headed rushing attack with Sean Tucker, Bucky Irving, and Rachaad White. We'll see how much Bucky gets as far as run dealing with that toe injury. And then, you're asking 3 guys who are basically number 3 guys to play 1 and 2 spots. And Liam's got to be very creative on how he gets these guys open. I expect to see lots of shifts and motions, but in a short week, getting them to play something that they're not expecting to play is going to be difficult as well. I think this is, with all the injuries, I think you look at and say, no Mike, no Chris, the Bucs don't have a chance, but I don't feel that way. I feel like there's still a chance that they could win this game. I think they're going to be playing for them, and that motivation can always help a team. And I think that they can definitely challenge an Atlanta Falcons team with that. A lot of people have that week 5 matchup, but outside of that, the Falcons haven't been this runaway team that has kind of blown people out of the water and, has been, high flying scoring offense. I mean, you look at their scores, they lost week 1 only scoring 10 points. They won week 2 scoring 22 points on the last minute. They lost only scoring 17 points to the Chiefs, only 26 points in the win over the Saints, 36 points and 38 points over the Panthers, but then just 14 points against the Seahawks. So I don't think this Falcons team is a team that you look at and you're like, wow, they are just, scoring at an unbelievable clip, and it's going to be tough for the Bucs to keep up with them in a shootout because I just don't think that's necessarily who this Atlanta Falcons team is. I think week 5 was just a rare anomaly between the Bucs struggling mightily over the middle of the field. It was Matt Ryan Ring of Honor night, so there's a little bit extra juice in the building too for that. And they were playing at home, but playing in Tampa, an indoor stadium, playing outdoors. The heat's not really terrible, but it's still going to be around 86 degrees at kickoff. They will be wearing the black jerseys, So, I think this is the game where I'm not counting the Bucs out, but I'm not overly sold on them. What are your thoughts on the Falcons' chances of winning this game, and what is your final score prediction?
Yeah, I think it ends up being lower scoring than what it was last time. I think I'll give Atlanta the edge, and I'll go Atlanta 24, Tampa 16. I think what it ends up being, it's a short week for Tampa. Obviously, all the injuries. It's a big uphill climb here, and it's the emotional part of that is real. That is 100% real. And this is, as you mentioned, this feels like a game where you would expect Atlanta to be heavily favored, to be, a legitimate, very convincing win. And it doesn't feel like it'll be that way. Like it feels like it should be that way, but it just won't be. It's tough for me to sit here and say that this will be a 2 or 3 score game. I don't think it'll be that way at all. Atlanta has, for sure, at times, I feel like played this year a little bit. I think, I feel like 4-3 is a very fitting record because it could totally be 2-5. It could totally be like 6-1. I think 4-3 is probably about what the Falcons are. I think they've been rather, average for a majority of the year. And I think that in the NFL, a lot of times you can get lost and this player's out, player X is out, player Y is out. All these guys are so good. And it definitely hurts. Right. But the guys that Tampa will bring in will make plays, right? The guys that Atlanta has who it expects will end up making plays, will make plays. I think Atlanta makes a little bit more because I think Atlanta has a few more playmakers healthy. And I think the short week part of that is important as well. So I think the Falcons win. I think it's close. I think it's a 1-score game. I like 24-16.
Yeah, I think it's a 1-score game too. I think it's going to be closer than what people think. I do have the Bucs pulling it out. I have them winning 20-17 this week. Again, I think that they have enough on offense to get the job done at home. I think energy is going to be high. They'll be feeding off that from the crowd. You look at kind of what the Bucs have done so far this season. They've been able to move the ball, and of course it's with Chris and it's with Mike, but it's also the scheme and the system that they have. They've only had one game where they have scored less than 20 points this season, and that was the blowout to the Broncos in week 3. So, I don't see them dropping off much in production. I don't see them hitting 30 points like they have in, 5 of their 7 games that they played. But I also don't see them completely falling off because I think they can anchor on the running game. I think the biggest thing here is going to be getting them in situations where they can be in 3rd and short, and taking away kind of what the Falcons have struggled at is being able to get those free shots at Baker Mayfield. I think there's a chip on their shoulder, even more so now. And when this team plays with a chip on their shoulder, it does some pretty incredible things. So I have them breaking the curse, beating the Falcons 20-17 on Sunday football, 1:00 start in the creamsicle uniforms. Daniel, I want to thank you so much for your time. Last minute, you came through like a stud. I appreciate it, man. Coworkers here technically at SI Now. Go ahead and let people know where they can find you. Drop your ats and all your social plugs.
Yeah, Twitter is just @by and then my name, and then si.com/NFL/Falcons for all of your NFC South Atlanta Falcons related content. I will be in Tampa, so if any of you guys happen to see me walking around the grounds of Raymond James, feel free to say hi. But yeah, as always, JC, I'm glad to join you. Glad it came together. Glad I was open for you, and really appreciate you having me on, man.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. There you go. Daniel Flick, SI Now writer, boots in the ground for the Atlanta Falcons. Appreciate him coming on last minute. We were supposed to have Locked On Falcons. But hey, we pivot. That's all we do. We pivot. Guys, that's going to do it for me here. Give a shout out to one of our final sponsors here, Mosley Heating and Air. When Florida heat hits hard, trust Mosley Heating and Air to keep you cool and comfortable with over 25 years of experience. Their family-owned business knows what it takes to keep your home and HVAC system running smoothly. Need a repair, new system, or maintenance plan? They've got you covered. Call Mosley Heating and Air, 813-230-3742, or visit mosleyheatingair.com. Mosley Heating and Air, where comfort meets reliability. A big shout out to Fango for giving away those tickets. Jared Britton, congratulations on the winning the tickets to go to the game this week. We'll give away more. It's Creamsicle Week. Go check out Duvin Designs at Raymond. If you're going to the game, check out it at the Pro Shop or check it out at the Buccaneers Shop or their website. So much cool stuff going on with the collaboration. 8 amazing pieces. They got a black hat. I need the black hat. I told them, I'm like, I need this black hat. That's so fire. And so many other awesome design pieces that they've got there as well. Again, I've got the Bucs winning this week 20-17. Close game. I think the Bucs find a way to pull it out. They've got pretty much, outside of obviously Mike and Chris and Tyke, pretty healthy. Bucky is not 100%, but he'll play again. You win some, you lose some on that one. Got Mike right Tuesday, Bucky half right on Thursday. What can you do? But I appreciate everybody here. Make sure you guys are liking, subscribing, turning on notifications for when we go live. That's going to do it. We're out of here. Again, thanks for tuning into the Pirate Parlay podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. I'm your host, JC. We're out of here. Peace.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Pirate Parlay on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.